Hi there. I wanted to talk more about the SIG XM5. I've just been thinking about some shit, and I think it's interesting. When I look at the SIG XM5, the reason I say I think they're going to replace the M4 with it is because of what I'm about to say, which is basically that the U.S. Army, for a lot of generations now, has done whatever, has used whatever the Special Forces did in the last war as their example of what to do in the next war. So, like in World War II, for example, we didn't really have special forces. There was like, what were those guys called? First Special Service Force or whatever. And they did kind of influence some of this stuff too. But like, if you look at World War II web gear and weapons and tactics and training and all that sort of shit and compare it to Vietnam, like the U.S. Army paratroopers during World War II were basically already wearing semi-Vietnam era equipment that they were homemaking themselves out of fucking like canvas and parachutes and shit. So in Vietnam, we had the 1956 web gear, which was developed after World War II. This web gear was a basically ready-made version of the rigger pouches and shit that they were making for airborne in World War II. And then they made it fit M14 mags because that's the mags that they were going to have. And there's lots of other shit with this kind of stuff that the U.S. does. They always model their future infantry off of their past special forces. And in the War on Terror, uh, we sure saw a shitload of 308s getting used by special forces. And I think for good or ill, they've taken this to mean, oh, we're going to need longer range weapons, especially in a fight in Europe. So they're thinking about like switching up tactics now. And like in the War on Terror, the Scar 17, I think that's the 308 one, and like the M110 and even the fucking like EBR and shit became go to weapons because we needed to engage further. And for sure, the XM5 is going to replace those. But I think their goal is, like it always is with the U.S. Army, we want everyone to have as much range as possible and be a rifleman and be able to shoot 10 million yards. And I think this is that old chestnut of Army wisdom coming back in the 21st century to fucking cause them to switch from assault rifles to battle rifles. And some of this may be like unforeseen threats that we don't know about. Maybe they're doing this for other reasons, but seems to me there is a legit body armor threat and there is a legit possible range threat that we encountered in Afghanistan. We really don't have anything modern that shoots at extended ranges, really. And like the M4 is even getting old. So I could actually see them ditching the M4 at some point in the future and replacing it with a Sig Virtus copy of some sort in 5.56. I think they're still going to need a 5.56 gun for something. But like, I think their new plan basically is to have a lot of tools in the toolbox and be able to equip a substantial portion of the U.S. Army with these in the future. They're calling this the XM5, and they ordered 16,000 of them. That's in old Vietnam terms. That's like what we did when we adopted the M16. That was like the first step of it. We ordered 20,000, 25,000, I think, something like that. And we called it the XM16. So this is now on the path to being fully adopted as a battle rifle for the United States Army. And it looks pretty fucking good and controllable and shit. And if it's select fire and somewhat controllable, I could see the argument for these over assault rifles. That's having every fucking rifleman have basically a light machine gun in some of the fights we could be going into could be interesting, mainly because a lot of the fights we're going into are going to be in big open areas. By the looks of it's Asia and Europe that we're probably going to be fighting in. They're going to have extended ranges. We are going to be able to use all of our cool shit. It's going to be an old school war. So I think that's partially their thought here. But like I think really it could be the NEA. Is NEA doing a chat right now? I didn't even know that. But it says, "Oh, I don't read comments because now I just lost my place." Anyway, I seriously think that this could be the U.S. Army's "we need a long range weapon, we need to outrange our enemy" thing coming back again, which is a legitimate thing. Like if we can get an extra couple hundred yards at no cost, why wouldn't you? Like if we can keep our infantry assets safer, that keeps everything else on the ground safer. Like this seems like a wise move. Usually, I'm not for the military spending money on guns, mainly because they developed some goofy shit. Look at anything they developed in the 90s. Like they were just pouring money at stupid shit. We got a couple interesting grenade launchers out of that program, but like nothing real. And then like SIG just on their own gets a bunch of special forces dudes and makes this rifle. I think that's kind of interesting. It's like when you have a good rifle company and experienced people, you get good rifles. And really, the thing that I actually like most about these new SIG guns is that 1913 rail buttstock thing. Like, it took a minute for me to grow on that because it looks goofy, but you could do so fucking much with that with a folding mag. You can put any stock you want on that gun. Like, that's the future. There's several things on that gun that are the future. The thing I think is really interesting is they're definitely aiming to sell that gun to NATO, and you can tell that because of its charging handles. It has an AR-15 charging handle and an FAL charging handle. Who would you be wanting to sell that gun to who had a bunch of AR-15s and a bunch of FALs and a bunch of troops trained to use them? Probably NATO, Israel, the US, because it was already looking at the US Army, right? But like they're building this gun with future contracts in mind. So like as soon as the US adopts this full on, it's going to pressure NATO to adopt it or something like it. And like this is going to create a lot of cool new guns, I think. This is a pretty cool technological development. And that's why I'm talking about it so much because this is the most interesting thing to happen in firearms in the last bit. Like 20 years probably for sure, maybe even more like 40. Like I'm trying to think of what the last like the polymer framed handgun was probably the last thing that was as big as the ammunition change up that they're talking about doing with NATO and the XM5 if it does go the whole way. And this is the thing I think most people don't get is like just because we do something doesn't mean necessarily that NATO's going to change. We've done a lot of shit where we have oddball caliber shit and like they don't do it. So, oh, we got one more comment. I'll go read that. Well, tell him to send me a link since we're doing chats at the same time, bitch. I'm going to go see if I can get in on Matt's chat, and I'll talk to you guys later. I hope someone enjoyed the XM5 video.